Are you sure?
Here's the 30-second lesson on what legends know. Never ask a bride why she's getting married. Don't wear a skirt on a windy day. Deodorant is not a shower. Don't sniff chili flakes. And don't forget, saving is not investing. Legends don't just save, they invest in mutual funds. Mutual fund investments are subject to market risks. Read all scheme-related documents carefully.
You don't have to be a spy story geek or even an intelligence enthusiast. You just need to be mildly interested in international affairs, and who isn't right now with so many wars going on and also the environment around India changing so rapidly. So even if you are a little bit interested in international affairs, you would have seen that something very interesting and unprecedented in the history of spyware happened. Spyware, not the kind of stuff that we get on our phones, no, like the business of real spies. That unusual thing was that the heads of two of the world's most prominent intelligence agencies, external intelligence agencies, of course, these are allies. The two heads got together with the editor of Financial Times in London at one of the flagship Financial Times events for a discussion. These two sat, talked fairly candidly. They didn't give away any secrets, obviously, but it's almost an hour's conversation. In fact, a little more than an hour's conversation. And we have a lot of takeaways there. Besides the fact that these two saw the need, first of all, to come out and openly speak like this, and second, it also underlines to us how the business of spying is changing. How spying, there is a spying diplomacy, everything is not hush-hush in spying, just as at some point of time during the Cold War, military diplomacy came up, generals talking to generals, admirals talking to admirals, air marshals talking to air marshals. Similarly, now an intelligence diplomacy is coming up, and also intelligence communication is coming up. Intelligence communication is not all secret. Intelligence agencies talk to people, talk to their voters, their constituents, their public opinion. They also talk to the world, and that's why when they talk, then everybody listens. So what happened in this conversation? A lot of the world listened to it very carefully, and I did so also. The fact is, it's so fascinating that I have to plan this mentally to make sure that this episode of Kartak Natak doesn't become longer than this conversation, because everything they say has context. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pick up about 10 points or so, state those to you very briefly, and then give you some context as we go along. Now, in addition to this conversation, they also wrote a joint op-ed article in Financial Times, of which I will share a link with you. I will share a link of the article and also of this video conversation. Please do check it out and also see the informality and also both the caution and the candor. So this is well rehearsed. Both of these are past masters at what they are doing. They know what to say, they know what not to say, and their interlocutor, in this case Rula Khalaf, the editor of Financial Times, is a brilliant editor and a brilliant mind as well. So what you have is a master class. Now in this master class, what are the highlights? Let me just list those for you. First, they say that for both CIA and SIS is also often called MI6. After all, we are all James Bond trained, isn't it? MI6 came up in 1909 on 4th of July, and I promise you, we didn't choose to get married on that date, or when we did, we didn't know that was the day of the founding of MI6. That's a coincidence. 4th of July 1909, MI6 was formed. That said, it's much older than CIA. CIA is a junior service in terms of history. CIA had other pedigree, but not as well defined as, say, MI6 and SIS. That said, for both CIA and SIS, these two chiefs say, they said in this conversation, in this joint interview, but also in their op-ed piece. That's the first point, that for both CIA and SIS, the rise of China is the principal intelligence and geopolitical challenge of the 21st century, and we have reorganized our services to reflect that priority. Number two, counter-terrorism continues to be at the core of their relationship, and the main threat there is seen to be as ISIS. No Al-Qaeda, no others, ISIS, precisely ISIS. Number 3, Russia's subversion of Europe. Besides the war in Ukraine, Russian intelligence's subversion across Europe and beyond is a very serious concern. Number 4 is, of course, the Russia-Ukraine war, in which these agencies are involved. Number 5, they say that they work not just among the Five Eyes alliance. Five Eyes are the 5 English-speaking countries: US, Britain, Canada, Australia, New Zealand. 5. So, Five Eyes countries, so not confined to Five Eyes countries only, but across Europe, in partnership with countries with which they share values. And they say this alliance is based on shared values and they are on their own side. So, they say that China, Russia, Iran and North Korea also work together, but they have darker considerations. After all, whatever I do is virtuous, whatever my rival does is darker. We let it pass. 6th point, that Middle East is a challenge, and both agencies are working together along with their partners to bring about de-escalation and peace. 7th point, they say that both agencies are now working very intensively with artificial intelligence, and in fact, Rula once asked them, do you use ChatGPT? What AI do you use? And Richard Moore said, well, not ChatGPT. If we did that, that would be a cause for great concern for everybody, because the whole world would then know what we are doing. So, they are using, they said, both AI and generative AI, and they are saying that they get a lot of data, immigrants, terrorists, etc., etc. And AI is also used to parse that data to figure out what's important, what is not. And the same way we are using cloud technology, a whole bunch of data scientists. So, AI has now become very central to their operations. An interesting expression I read, they say that we are also using AI to red team our own operations. Red teaming your own operations means cloaking them in secrecy so others are not able to figure out what you're doing. Next point to make is that the international world order, or the balanced system that has led to relative peace and stability since the end of the Cold War, is now under threat. So, these are the 8 basic points that I thought I will first list and then try to elaborate these for you. So, first one, China. On China, they say that evolution of technologies is the main area of concern with China. So, CIA chief Bill Burns says that there are 12 or so building blocks, or you might say mission centers in the CIA, of which one is dedicated to China. So, China is the only country to which an entire mission center is dedicated. All the others are scattered. All the others then look at all of the rest of the world. There was a time under Donald Trump that a center was set up for North Korea, a center was set up for Iran. Then under this administration, under Bill Burns, they collapsed those centers. So one became an East Asia center, one became a nearest East Asia center. So other centers look at a bunch of countries combined or collapsed into regions, whereas China is the only country which has a standalone center looking at it. That's important. Again, Bill Burns says that over the past 3 years, so much budget has been allocated to China that at this point, and this is growth over 3 years. Over 3 years, the CIA budget allocated to China has gone up 3 times, 3x, and today it is 20% of all of CIA's budget. That should really please Xi Jinping and make him feel really important. Then, next point, Xi is the most powerful Chinese leader since Mao. Richard Moore said that, and he says he has a strong agenda at home and also overseas. MI6 and CIA both say, or SIS if you prefer. To me, MI6 comes more naturally. MI6 or SIS and CIA together say, both chiefs said, that they have met their Chinese counterparts about Ukraine, because their concern is that China and Russia are now together, they are close. So what is it that the Chinese are giving to Ukraine? So obviously they will do their own squeeze play and try and do their intelligence diplomacy with the Chinese. So both have met their Chinese counterparts. That's interesting. And the direct quote from them is, we both sat in front of them and talked them through. And talked them through what? Talked them through the complexities and the implications of China's engagement with Russia, because that's what these two secret agencies are interested in. And also on the implications if dual-use technologies or goods with dual-use ability are transferred or are sold by China to Russia, because the concern on the Western side is that a lot of the dual-use technologies are going from China to Russia. No weapons are going or no ammunition is going, but dual-use technologies are going, which are helping Russia refurbish and rebuild its military industrial complex. Extension of the same point, Bill Burns specifies that over the past year he has made 2 trips to China to meet his Chinese counterparts to exchange thoughts on these precise issues, and that is where he uses the expression intelligence diplomacy. And again he says that, look, whatever evidence we have, no weapons have been sold by the Chinese to the Russians, but there is a lot of dual use stuff that's going in, and that is shoring up Russia's defense industrial base. Then a question is asked, how close is Russia to building its gas pipeline to China? Because if that happens, that will change the game, because then Russia can sell a lot more energy. A lot of that gas was earlier being bought by Europe, notably Germany. Now Europe is being discouraged from buying that. Europe is looking at Qatar and other places. Russia needs a buyer, a mega buyer for so much gas that can produce a lot of money, and that money can produce a lot of Iskander missiles and much else, right? So Putin needs that money. Richard Moore says that Russia is a long way off from that gas pipeline. He says, in fact, what is more fungible, we have to focus on what is more fungible, which is like oil. So oil is being taken out, and we have to keep an eye on those tankers which may be running this oil out of Russia, breaking the sanctions. That means taking oil to some buyers who will then pay in dollar in some ways, which the Russians can make use of, etc., etc., or at a price which is below the ceiling that has been set under the sanctions. Richard Moore also says that Russia must aspire for the pipeline, we know, but it's a long way off because there are strong logistical and technological challenges. Then the next question comes up, is Iran giving ballistic missiles to the Russians? Because it's not as if Russians don't have ballistic missiles. They have ballistic missiles which on a scale of 10, maybe 9 compared to Iran's 2. But you know what Stalin said, that quantity itself is a kind of quality, right? So how many missiles do you need? The rate at which the Russians are firing these, they can do with any number of missiles. And these don't particularly have to be super sophisticated, because once so many missiles come in a volley, your air defense systems are going to be stressed as well. And that can also lead to possibilities of friendly fire, because if you have so many targets coming in and so many of your own projectiles going up, and sometimes your fighter planes also going up, then you don't know what hits what. And that is the kind of thing, something like that happened when the Ukrainians lost their star pilot and their first F-16 to a combat loss just a week and a half back. Ukrainians have later acknowledged that this was hit by a Patriot missile, which may have been targeting an incoming missile from the Russian side. So this is a very crowded airspace, and Russia needs more missiles. Now, this question was asked of Bill Burns, and Bill Burns said, if Iran gave ballistic missiles to Russia, this will be a dramatic escalation. Then he was asked, because the interviewer Rula Khalaf persisted, she said, that's okay, but have they given Russia ballistic missiles? At which Bill Burns only smiled and he said, look, all I would say at this point is that if they were to give ballistic missiles to Russia, it will mark a dramatic escalation. However, everybody said that already lots and lots of drones given by the Iranians to Russians are being used in this warfare. Again, what is it that Russians can give to Iran in exchange? That question was asked, because Iran doesn't need oil. China can buy oil from Russia, India can buy oil from Russia, Iran can sell oil to the rest of the world, right? So what does Russia give to Iran? To which these intelligence chiefs said that Russia is very capable of transferring technologies that will make Iran's missiles better. And as Iran's missiles get better, if Iran's missiles get better, that will enhance the threat to quote unquote our allies in the Middle East, namely Israel, UAE, Saudi Arabia, countries like that. Qatar is nobody's friend, we know. Then some other interesting points come up. For example, Bill Burns says that there was a time towards the end of 2022 when it looked like we had come really close to some kind of an escalation because Russians had started talking about using tactical nukes, that is, small sized nukes or battlefield nukes as these are sometimes called. And he said Russians are bullies, they will do saber rattling every now and then. So at that point we had to engage with the Russians, so also let them know the implications of this. And the Russian counterpart he met then was Sergei Narishkin, and this meeting took place in November 2022 in Turkey. Sergei Narishkin is the head of SVR, which is the Russian foreign intelligence agency. Now shifting to the war in Ukraine. These two guys say that Putin's offensive has failed and Kursk move is bold and audacious. This has taken the war to Russia. What they say this has done, this Kursk offensive, is to unsettle Putin's self-created and smug image of a plan to ground down Ukraine, wear down the West and dictate terms for peace. Kursk has changed all of that. Of course, what they are not saying is that part of Putin's plan or expectation also is that there will be a change in the US as a result of these elections and Trump will come with a different policy. But obviously these two intelligence chiefs can't say that or speculate on that. William Burns also says there is no evidence of Putin's grip weakening. However, Richard Moore adds, do not mistake a tight grip with a stable grip on power. Because we saw this in our neighborhood the other day in Bangladesh, that a tight grip is not the same as stable grip. Once it goes, once you lose that grip, you lose everything. Russian intelligence operations. Now, interesting expression used by Richard Moore. He says that Russian intelligence operations have gone feral in places. Feral is like a wild animal kept in captivity, then released. Usually, it's used for wolf packs, right, who hunt in packs, unmindful of risks. Thoda jangli janwar, right, a bit like that. So he says that Russian intelligence operations have gone feral. Burns says that they've now become so careless that we are rolling them in very quickly. They are being kicked out of Europe because the question comes up that how come so many Russian agents are now operating in Mexico, and are they then acting to drive refugees out of Mexico into America, which is a very live political issue, particularly in these elections. Both of them say yes, and they say one of the reasons you find so many Russian agents in Mexico also is that so many of them are being quote unquote kicked out of Europe. So they have to go someplace. The example that Richard Moore uses is the assassination of Sergei Skripal in Salisbury, where he says that the assassin left a whole vial of Novichok, the deadly poison. That one vial, he says, was enough to kill an entire school, and in fact killed a British citizen as well. So that is the kind of recklessness with which they are operating. What is the situation now in Gaza, Hamas, in the Middle East? So both say that talks are going on. In fact, William Burns talks more about this because he's the one who's been doing this diplomacy on both sides, and he says they've been working with their partners in Egypt and Qatar, and 90% of the agreement on ceasefire, return of hostages, return of Palestinian prisoners is done. But he says the 10% that remains is very, very difficult, and he says that lies in the definition of the 10% which has not yet been resolved because it is the most difficult part. However, he says, whatever you might say, there is no solution but a two-state solution. And this is a good time to arrive at some kind of a lasting peace, because the real answer to Iran, he says, is a thawing of relationship or a deepening of relationship formally between Israel and Saudi Arabia. That is a very important takeaway also for India, that formally establishing an open relationship between Israel and Saudi Arabia is seen by these Western powers as the greatest counter to Iran. I said very important for India because that is also critical to IMEC, that is the India, Middle East, Europe corridor, because it has to pass through Saudi Arabia and transit through Israel as well. So all those transit rights will need a normalization of relationships there. A couple of interesting highlights, particularly if you happen to be intelligence geeks. So first of all, Rula Khalaf asked both these chiefs, the CIA chief and the SIS/MI6 chief, to name their favorite spying gadget. Now the CIA, Bill Burns was very cagey. He said, my favorite gadget is my 2013 Subaru, which I drive, and everybody knows, especially my daughter, everybody knows my problems with gadget. They also tried to trivialize the question by Richard Moore saying that my favorite tech gadget is an iPhone. Burns saying mine is the classic fountain pen. This is a classic fountain pen. I don't think it's much of a spying gadget. But then Richard Moore says that he would still say that if you do some time travel, then his favorite spying gadget would be Alan Turing's secure phone, which could sit in a suitcase at a time when Americans designed a secure phone that would fill an entire room. Now this led to some banter, and Burns said, joining the banter, responding, and I quote from him, the only problem at that point was that Turing had electrocuted himself many a times while making the secure suitcase. Now this done, let me also talk for half a minute about who was Alan Turing. A remarkable personality, born in 1912, dead in 1954 at just over 41 years of age. He achieved a hell of a lot in his life. Mathematician, computer scientist, crypto analyst, etc., etc. One of the champion code breakers of British intelligence in the Second World War, particularly the German submarine communication code. So he became a star. How did he die so young? He died because he took his own life with cyanide. Very complex life, very interesting life, a fascinatingly talented character, was married the conventional way, but was prosecuted for homosexual acts in 1952. Then it was illegal in Britain. Prosecuted for homosexual acts in 1952. To escape a jail sentence, he agreed, it's like a plea bargain, to give away his sexuality in a way, right? To escape a jail sentence, he chose hormonal treatment, which is a kind of chemical castration. It is not long after that you can see that he died by suicide. Now that had remained a scar in British history because he was also a star, he was honored, he was somebody who contributed at such a young age with his genius mind to winning the Second World War, that a campaign came up in 2009 for the state to apologize to him, to pardon him, and also to restore his image. And this was in 2009. This campaign led Gordon Brown, then Labour Prime Minister, to issuing an apology to Alan Matheson Turing for the appalling, quote-unquote, appalling treatment handed out to him. If you are a film watching type, it's quite likely that you might have also seen the 2014 film, The Imitation Game, starring Benedict Cumberbatch and Keira Knightley. That was based on Alan Turing's remarkable life. Having said all of that, one more thing about the changing business of spying. Check out Twitter, or what's called X now. I can't get over Twitter. And search for Richard Moore. You will actually find him. You will find the chief of MI6 on Twitter or X. This is a verified handle. And then see what he's written there. He says, RT's retweets show my interest was piqued, nothing more. And then he mentions his pronouns, he/him. So once again, one more little evidence that the business of spying or espionage is now changed.